In the movies that I've done, sometimes the crew really are risking violence or jail time or expulsion. Jokes aside, I mean, some of them have been in very difficult and potentially violent situations. So they have to really believe in the project. Ali G.
Hello.
The simple joke of Ali G was take the most stupid person in the world and put them next to the world expert.
Check it out, I was here with none other than my main man, Buzz Aldrin. What was it like not being the first man on the moon? Was you ever jealous of Louis Armstrong?
It was Neil Armstrong.
So I started with Philippe Gaulier, who is the legendary clown teacher. After I did Ali G, I went to him and I said, listen, you know, it's a clown character. Because Ali G is incredibly stupid and incredibly ignorant.
Ain't God just like an overhyped David Blaine's?
No, and a lot of people would find that suggestion very offensive.
Yo, sorry.
He's delusional, right? So when people are delusional, they can be really funny. And he said, no, he goes, you're not a clown. He goes, it's bouffon. So I'd studied with him this genre of acting called bouffon, which is a sort of early form of satire. In medieval times, certain people who were seen as different or unacceptable would perform these plays called bouffon plays, where they would pretend to be people in authority. And the idea was, you know, you'd have this person with a huge deformity playing the King of France. The King of France would look at it and go, oh, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me, and get so upset that he'd have a heart attack. And so it had a certain hardness to it. It wasn't just sort of silly jokes to people in power. It had the aim to undermine those in power.
I've got some business idea that I just want to tell you about, and I'll be a fool if...
Very quickly.
We went to Trump Towers, and I remember waiting for him. He was the only guy who ever kept us waiting. Everyone else would be very punctual, and I would hear him go, you do this and that. He's screaming at someone, and it becomes clear that he's screaming at Giuliani when Giuliani was mayor. And so it's intimidating, right? You're quite scared. This guy comes in the room and starts speaking to the producer, thinking that he's the interviewer, and the producer is this sort of handsome, blonde, posh guy who went to Oxford. And he goes, all right, let's start the interview. And then he goes, no, actually, you're interviewing this guy. And he looks at me as Ali G and immediately hates me. You know, incredibly disappointed, reluctant. Really, are you sure we don't? Okay, fine, let's get on with this. So he was ready to go the moment he saw me.
What do you do in that moment? Where's your brain at?
I'm like, yo, respect, hey, big up yourself. What? How does that spell your name again?
Okay. It's Trump, innit?
Right.
And Rakim, remember at the beginning, what are you doing?
TR... It's up there.
So part of the job when you're undercover is you are trying to see what they are thinking. And in the real world, real people perform like bad actors. Like soap actors, right? If they're suspicious, they look you up and down or they start squinting. And so you're reading the other person's face and actually, you know, their body language. And if there's multiple people, you're reading everyone in the room. So that's when it becomes really difficult. If you're doing an interview with 6 people, sometimes you can be in a room with 40 people where you are trying to see if there's anything going on. If somebody starts squinting their eyes and they're suspicious, they start, you know, looking at you, then you have to double down. This sounds absurd, but, you know, this is what's going on in my mind. You're trying to push through their suspicion, push it down. The interesting one to look at early on is Tony Benn. Tony Benn was a socialist member of parliament, and he was the first person to challenge Ali G when Ali G was talking about, yo, my bitches say, he was like, wait a minute, you're talking about women in a derogatory way.
But most of the time we want to chill, we want to hang with my bitches, whatever. You just want to relax.
Treat women with a great deal of disrespect. You call them a bitch as if you were a dog.
No, that ain't a term of disrespect.
Well, it is a term of disrespect. Just like animals, you're calling them animals.
Rather than pandering to the youth, he challenged Ali G, and he was very upset because he said, I didn't realize who he was. And then actually about 6 months later, he called me up. And he said, I have to tell you, I want to thank you because I walked down the street and people want to talk to me about socialism. And young people haven't wanted to talk about socialism for 30 years. Borat.
Yakshimash. My name is Borat. I like you. I like sex. It's nice.
When I first started doing Borat, he was from Moldova. And I was doing it for the BBC. He was called Alexei Krikler. And in those days, I didn't really prepare anything. I was a one-man band, you know, me and one cameraman. And I went to learn etiquette with some member of the royal family, lesser royal. And she brought me to some dinner. And they go, oh, I'm going to put you next to the Moldovan ambassador. And so they sat me next to the Moldovan ambassador, and I was pretending to be Moldovan. And I thought, how the hell do I get out of this? I go, here's a spy! Here's a spy! Everybody, he's bugging this! And I realized it was him or me. And I think I managed to get him thrown out of the dinner. Yeah.
So you got thrown out and then you managed to just continue as the only...
Yeah, I think I managed to get him, people would sort of suspect him rather than me.
Like this.
Yeah.
But don't show your huggies though, man. No. These are my anti-pants.
When I was experimenting with Borat, I ended up taking my trousers off and I had my actual underpants on. And I remember the person who I was with saying, hold on, why are you wearing those if you're from Kazakhstan? And it blew the whole scene. And at that point, I realized that I would have to be a complete person. You know, so I wasn't a method actor, but I had no other alternative but to appear like a, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis in the real world because I had to be prepared for anything. The moment they or anyone in their team meet this person, it has to be completely real. So that means when I do these performances, sometimes they can last up to many hours long and sometimes a few days long. In the second Borat movie, there was a scene that lasted 3 days. When I did Borat 2, Maria comes along and they said, okay, teach Maria how to do it. I didn't really realize there was a method and I never told it to anyone for, 22 years. And suddenly I have to train up this, brilliant young actor who's brilliant, but she goes, how do I do this? And so I taught her how to use the fear, that adrenaline and that energy is going to make your performance really captivating on screen. And I think it's part of the reason why she's so alive and she's so vibrant on screen is because she's terrified. Her body is full of adrenaline.
Okay, Аз искам също да ям едно кексче.
Ма питам, лохлим, зелото.
Моля те.
Ивша ласот взел. Teenagers.
Please give it to me, Daddy, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me.
Okay, cheesecake.
And then you're both having to do this thing that you rehearsed the previous night. What is that like? Talk me through the process of doing something like that.
Well, we know what the scene is. You have to have we use the term complicity. That's what Philip Golier taught me is, connection between the actors where we really enjoy watching them together and they understand each other. So, before we go into the scene, I go, this is what it's basically going to be. I'm going to say this and it goes to that. And then if she's got the line wrong, I had a few cues that she knew. I would say tishe, which would be like, be quiet now. because I would need, you'd still need to make sure that this is a good joke. And for a joke to really land, you've got to make sure nobody else is talking at that point. So we had tishe, a few other things that would say, okay, start, stop. So you're kind of directing her in the moment. And then we knew the shape of the scene.
Inject him with the Wuhan flu. Inject him with the Wuhan flu.
We did a scene at a gun rally during COVID. There were a lot of submachine guns and semi-automatics. And there was a danger that somebody would, get very angry, recognize me, and potentially use one of their guns. So, I wore a bulletproof vest for that one. I was singing this song called the Wuhan Flu. And it was really about the danger of another term with Donald Trump and whether American democracy would move to kind of authoritarianism and what he would do to his opponents. And whether his supporters would agree with giving them the Wuhan flu or, killing them, essentially. in this kind of job. What are you gonna do with the Wuhan flu?
Okay, journalists, are we gonna inject them with the Wuhan flu?
And obviously playing on the xenophobia at the time and this sort of anti-Asian feeling. And then one person in the audience realized who I was. And then word started spreading that it was me. People started trying to storm the stage, but I had to finish the scene. Somebody pulled a gun, and luckily I had a great guard who got the gun out of the guy's hand and got into the ambulance. The problem was then we were surrounded by all these guys with guns and semi-automatics. And I'm saying to the ambulance guy, go, go, go. He's not going. We're lying on the floor. One of the doors opens and they start trying to pull me out. It was actually just a whole lesson in physics. Because I was lying down, I got the leverage pulling the door back, and I managed to, be stronger just because of the pure science of it than all these guys trying to pull me out. And luckily, somebody from our side said, there's a guy in there who needs to get to hospital. I mean, I would have gone to hospital, but... and they let us go.
Clinton drink the blood of children?
In Borat 2, I stay in a house with these two conspiracy theorists, Jim and Jerry. And I think we all had preconceptions about what a conspiracy theorist would be, but these guys were actually lovely. They believed that Hillary was drinking the blood of children, but they also felt that they had to tell Borat that it's really important that he loves his daughter. She can be a journalist, and it's not right to give her as a gift to Giuliani. So they were human beings, and you realize from that actually the things that we're told, the information that we're given, or the misinformation that we're given, is crucial, and it affects how you behave. So some people that we'll dismiss as bad or immoral are actually just those who are misinformed. But then the onus is on those who are spreading the misinformation and the platforms who are allowing that. The Dictator.
America, the birthplace of AIDS.
There was a writing team called Berg, Schaefer, Mandel. Alec Berg, Jeff Schaefer, and Dave Mandel, who all went on to do brilliant things. And they were working at Curb Your Enthusiasm. They came into me and they pitched a few different movies. And one of them was this dictator who has a double. And then suddenly I started improvising, it's too pointy, the missile is not pointy enough. It must be more pointy. How will it fly? It is too round on the top. It must be more pointy.
It is too round on the top. It needs to be pointy. Round is not scary. Pointy is scary. This will put a smile on the faces of the enemy. They will think that it is a huge robot's dildo flying towards them.
And actually, apparently, Elon Musk saw The Dictator and then insisted that one of his SpaceX rockets was more pointy to make it fly better. Actually, he was aware it would make it fly slightly worse, but he thought it was a funny thing to do. So because I had to weigh in with this character of this all-powerful idiot, Jason Mantzoukas, who was playing the nuclear scientist, was like, are you sure? I don't think it's really will fly with that. It has to be pointy, otherwise it will, So once I've got to weigh in with the voice, I'm kind of locked into the character, then I kind of can do anything. While we're shooting the movie, it's a movie about a dictator trying to stop his dictatorship turning into a democracy. And while we're shooting it, the Arab Spring occurs. The dictator was not Arabic, but the fact that the Arab Spring was going on and there were popular demonstrations against dictatorships, we, questioned the end of the movie and is the ending that it's a dictatorship or a democracy? And we kind of thought it probably may not be successful, the Arab Spring. And so at the end of the movie, it remains a kind of dictatorship, but with a pseudo-democracy. Talladega Nights.
Even Diane Sawyer needed Katie Couric. Will you be my Katie Couric?
Wow. I feel like I'm in Highlander.
How did I get into it? I used to play basketball. Gary Shandling, the legendary comedian, had a basketball game for comedians. Will Ferrell would play there, Adam Sandler, Sarah Silverman, Adam McKay. And I would play there. And I got friendly with McKay and Will, and they asked me to do this thing. I'd just come off Borat the day before I was shooting Borat. And on the plane to the read-through, I thought, I'm playing this French gay Formula 1 driver. What's this character? And I went, my clown teacher, Philippe Gaulier.
So I did Philippe Gaulier. You know, the voice of Philippe Gaulier. You are terrible on stage.
I always need a voice to get into, a silly voice to get into the character. I said to Adam McKay, I said, what happens if I kiss him at the end? And then I say, sir, you taste of America. And he goes, I don't know. I go, why don't we just try it? Let's see. Why not? What do we lose? It would take like 45 seconds. And we did it, and it became the end of the movie. And we had about 1,000 people in the crowd at the time who were NASCAR fans, who started booing. I was kissing Will Ferrell, who they loved. Brüno.
I made a deal with the mother.
And at this time, we're taking the child into protective custody.
You are not doing that. You are not taking the child into protective custody. That is my baby.
Give it back! Give me my baby back! Give me my baby! Give me the... Yeah!
In the movies that I've done, sometimes the crew really are risking violence or jail time or expulsion. No jokes aside, I mean, some of them have spent a night in a cell or been chased or been in very difficult and potentially violent situations. So they have to really believe in the project, and they have to believe that I've got their back and that I'm looking after them as well. And that we're making a movie not just to be entertaining, but to do hopefully something good. Mm-hmm. So the end of Brüno was Brüno and his assistant kiss and make love in the middle of a UFC fighting ring. So we get on the phone with the lawyer before and go, what can we do? What can't we do? We're going to have 2,000 people in there. He said, but the most important thing is you don't incite a riot. I go, well, the end of the movie is written that there's a riot in this. He goes, well, if you've crossed state lines to incite a riot, that's a federal offense and you can go to jail for up to 5 years. I had to make out this guy. Touch an nibble, but I couldn't put it in my mouth. He could squeeze my buttocks, but not play with my anus. He could... all these things that were specific to the law of that particular, of Arkansas. And, we hired 15 security guys because we knew it was going to be really dangerous. We had a parole officer there who had a lot of his guys who just got out of jail came to fill in the crowd. And at one point I just got carried away. We had this fight, me and my assistant, who I'm secretly in love with, comes in, he looks weaker than I do. I beat him up and he's bleeding. We had fake blood capsules. And the crowd start booing me. And I got carried away. And I said to the crowd, what the fuck are you talking about? Come on, any of you fuckers come in here, I'll beat the shit out of you. Knowing that I had security, no one could get in. Basically, I got too into character and I, forgot about what the lawyer had said. And I see this huge guy running to the cage. The guy grabs the cage, does a flip, lands in front of me, and he's huge. He's like 6'9", and he's a trained ultimate fighter. And I realized at that point I'm going to get badly hurt. And I had one god, we built a trap door, and he pulls open the trap door. He goes, go, 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 which means go, go, go. We can run out of there, but we hadn't finished the movie. So we drive overnight to a different part of Arkansas, and we shoot the scene again. Trial of the Chicago 7.
We carried certain ideas across state lines. Not machine guns or drugs or little girls, ideas. When we crossed from New York to New Jersey to Pennsylvania to Ohio to Illinois, we had certain ideas. And for that, we were gassed, beaten, arrested, and put on trial.
In university, I did an undergraduate thesis about basically progressive Jews who were in the Black Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. One of them was Abbie Hoffman. Then I heard they were making a movie about the Chicago 7, and I called up Steven Spielberg, and said, I'd just done Borat, and I said, I'd really like to play Abbie Hoffman. He said, great. For me, the costume and the language and the accent are really important. So I'm playing a real person. So I was looking at his language and I thought, well, why don't we use his costume? And actually, it was performative. He was very conscious about what he was wearing. So I'm using his language. Why not use what he wore? So I insisted on wearing things that he had worn at the time. And having his hair, because that also was a statement. He was saying, you know, I'm a yippie, I'm free, I'm against the establishment.
This is a political trial that was already decided for us. Ignoring that reality is just weird to me.
There are civil trials and there are criminal trials. There's no such thing as a political trial.
Okay.
So there was zero improvisation. And that was a challenge for me because I wanted to give Aaron a variety of takes to use in the edit. So he said, listen, it's fine. You know, that one take you've given me is great. We're moving on. And I said, listen, for me, I would love to give you options. So what I'll do is I'll do a take and then I'm going to keep the camera rolling. I'll stop for 2 seconds and then I'll do the take again, but in a completely different way. I'll stop for 2 seconds and then do it again. So, you know, a 1 minute monologue would be 3 minutes and a bit. And then you've got options in the edit. You know, he needed to be convinced, but the editor really liked it and used a bunch of that stuff. But it was, yeah, it was fun.
The strategy of throwing banana peels all over Chicago. And the machine will stumble. When it stumbles, it goes into a policy of overkill and it starts to devour itself. We got to convince him. We got to convince him of what? That we're crazy enough to do anything.
The greatest dialect coach in the world is a guy called Tim Monick. If there were Oscars for dialect coaches, he would have won 12. He's worked on most great movies you've ever seen. And amazingly, after Hugo, he said, okay, I'll work with you. Madagascar.
Move it! I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it.
So Jeffrey Katzenberg says, he's running DreamWorks, he goes, I want you to be in a movie. Shrek had just come out. I thought DreamWorks were great. I go, sure. So he said, it's set in Madagascar. I want you to play this lemur. He's king of the lemurs. I said, cool. He goes, all right, come up with a voice and let's meet up, you know, in a few days. And basically, I'd done a lot of research on actual Madagascan voices. And he hated it. And then we spent about 2 hours, me going through about 17 voices that I had. And in the end, we landed on this guy who was my sister-in-law's uncle, called Uncle Sion.
Welcome, giant pansies. Please feel free to bask in my glow.
That had, you know, had this kind of, you know, voice like this. He lived in Singapore, then moved to Australia. He was originally from Iraq. Really complicated, and he would make jokes about satay the whole time. I said, there's a problem with this character in that he's stupid. I think they'd written him as not stupid. I said, it's gonna be much funnier if he's an idiot. But, you know, the plot won't work unless he has a sidekick who is intelligent. So we created the sidekick character.
Wait, I have a plan.
Really?
I've devised a cunning test to see whether these are savage killers.
Me and Ant Hines would, who was my co-writer, would go into the recording studio and improv. You know, so he was playing essentially the straight man, I was being stupid. And we'd go on these very, very long improvs that were, you know, some of the improvs were like 40 minutes long. I came back one day and I said, how about I like to move it, move it? And he goes, all right. We tried it with the director and suddenly it felt great in that character. And I did it in one go. Physically fit, physically fit. So it all in one go, no, the New York Giants. You know, it's all the mouth and yeah. Physically fit, physically, you know, me dancing, all of that, all of King Julien, all the physicality is me. Hugo.
Gustav, have a heart. Please help me.
Please.
No, he's been undermining this station for too long.
I am the station inspector, and when I first read the script, it wasn't a very interesting part. And I sat down with Marty and with John Logan, the screenwriter, and I said, all right, I've got a great idea where we do this chase and we turn a corner and my leg flies off my body and into camera. And that then translated into he had an issue with his leg, that he'd been injured in World War I, had this kind of leg brace. And, so trying to get, how do you stop this guy from being just a pretty unconstructed, normal villain to being an interesting character? So I said, could he have a love story? And so we got Emily Mortimer in, and she's got a flower stall, and we created a little romance for him, that this guy who's, wounded in World War I and is actually desperate for some connection. So what was interesting was he completely let me improvise. We'd be doing a scene, we've done, 12 different angles of it. I'm running after the boy. And I said, oh, it's a shame I didn't think of this beforehand, but it'd be great if I accidentally push over this woman here, and that would have been funny. And he goes, let's try it. And I go, but how are you going to edit that together? You've already done 11 angles. He goes, if it's good, we'll just use that angle. So it's a brilliant me learning from the greatest director of all time how to make a movie where you don't need coverage if it's great. Les Misérables.
Ready with a handshake and an open palm. Tells a saucy tale, makes a little stir. Customers appreciate the bon vivant.
I joined Les Mis very late. I was shooting The Dictator, and I originally turned it down because I said, I can't make the schedule, I'm in the edit of this, and I have to get it out for a certain time. So they let me join the last 3 weeks of production. Tom Hooper was filming. So he said, you know what? He was a great collaborator. He really believes in collaboration. He said, why don't you work out that routine for Master of the House? And then I'll pop in once every couple of days and show me what you've got. It was singing live. And I ended up blowing my voice, lost my voice completely. And so I went on voice rest. It came to shooting Master of the House. And I knew the whole routine. He didn't. So I would basically have to write it out, I go, da-da-da, this comes out here because I couldn't speak, and I was saving the voice just to sing. So it's quite a bizarre thing of me with, the camera's here, the joke is here. He wanted it to be funny. That.
Ordering the wine, making up the way, picking up their knickknacks when they can't see straight.
The Spy.
This is all so confusing. They seem to have a revolution every 2 months.
We like to joke that the leader is the first Syrian officer to get to the radio in the morning. Tell the people he's president. Tomorrow I'm scheduled to hand in your report to Yakov.
What does it say?
So The Spy was a very obscure story about an Israeli spy born in Egypt who then moves to Israel and goes undercover in Syria called Eli Cohen. And he, in a way, is one of the most successful spies in the post-World War II era. Never kills anyone, never shoots anyone, fights anyone, but he helps Israel win one of the crucial wars. And he manages to ascend up the ranks in Syria by basically being charming. It was a story that I knew about. It was very obscure, but the book was in our house when we grew up. Our man in Damascus, and eventually I agreed to do it. I learned an Egyptian accent and a Syrian accent. It's probably, when you look at it, if you don't live in the Middle East, you will not be able to tell the difference.
My name is Kamel Amin Thabeth. If I'm right, I applied to you twice before. You rejected me twice too.
And maybe if you do live in the Middle East, you'd think I've got it wrong, but it was to help me go into the two characters. He's playing a role. Disclaimer.
Why on earth would you hate yourself? You wouldn't even hurt a fly. You're a good person.
Am I?
Of course you are, Poppet. You are Saint Catherine.
I don't know that I am a good person.
Robert is a well-to-do, well-educated lawyer for a philanthropic legal firm. He's an interesting person because he is seems like a really supportive husband, but he's actually slightly jealous of the success of his wife. And he's what would be called a beta, who through this new information and after the pain and the suffering manages to use it to diminish her in a fairly cruel, but in his mind, virtuous way. Part of the reason when I do these movies, and they're pretty rare that I'm jumping into somebody else's world, is really to learn and steal their techniques and sometimes some of their crew. So, you know, okay, he's a good visual effects producer, he's a good cameraman. Alfonso is one of the greatest directors of all time. You know, he's made a bunch of incredible movies. He's very, you know, firstly, visually, everything is going to be absolutely perfect. He's working with Chivo, who, you know, Emmanuel Lubezki, who's this legendary DP. And so everything visually has to be perfect, but then he is as obsessed by performance.